Hey, everybody. Hope you're doing really well. I'm really excited today because I have my longtime friend, Frank. We've known each other for a while now. I think since
Long time.
2005.
Long
Yeah,
time.
yeah. That's since my first NFL draft is media.
Yeah,
2000.
that may have been 2005, maybe
Yeah,
somewhere
yeah,
around there.
yeah. 2005.
Yeah.
I have a photograph of you on our old corporate website, Sports Business Simulations, when I covered the draft, put everything there. So yeah, you're there. You're there.
Mhm.
Uh, Frank Supovitz, president of Fast Traffic Events. And guess what, folks? He's got a new podcast. Take a look. He's moved into my realm. Look out. He's gonna wipe me out. So,
I have. I'm not there to wipe you out at all.
oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
Just I'm happy to help you.
Well, thank you, Zenny.
This is wonderful, Frank. So tell us about first of all, how, if you could give us a quick rundown on your thoughts regarding sports events as we come out of the pandemic. I say that because I'm not personally certain that we're out of it yet, but that's me. Where are we, Frank?
Well, we're getting there.
Mhm.
I think we're in a new phase, and nobody expected there to be an on-off switch for this. There was certainly an off switch. We know that. About a year and a half ago, everything shut down, but there was no real expectation that it would come back all at once. So there have been a number of opportunities to kind of test opening stadiums. And, baseball's been doing it, basketball's been doing it, hockey's been doing it, football did it. This past Memorial Day weekend, the Indianapolis 500 opened with 135,000 people at Indianapolis Motor Speedway, which was, I think, the largest event of any kind anywhere on the planet. In terms of gathering a large number of people together. Remembering, however, that 135,000 people at Indianapolis Motor Speedway is only 40% of capacity. So even so, they were able to maintain physical distancing and maintain whatever public safety and public health requirements were in place in Indianapolis at the time. So, it was 135,000 people. It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
But usually they see for the Indy 500, they usually see between 300 and 320,000 people. So, it was a good test, and they have been taking very, very careful notice of infection rates and hospitalization rates in Marion County, which is where the Speedway is located. And they have, in fact, gone down since the Indy 500. So there hasn't been this renewed conflagration of infection. So things are looking up, I think you'll see more and more, stadiums and arenas starting to open to very close to full capacity. And, and hopefully if everybody gets their vaccines, and I am a proponent of that, we can see people come back and not have to wear masks or maintain social distancing. So the world is starting to turn the corner. At least the U.S. is starting to turn the corner. Clearly, in other parts of the world, there's still a great deal of infection and a great deal of public safety risk. But here in the States, things are looking up.
Hey, let's talk about your new podcast, and let's get a look at when things go wrong. And I seem to think I have a feeling I know where that title came from.
Yeah, it was inspired by a book that came out in 2019 called "What to Do When Things Go Wrong." I wrote it. McGraw-Hill published it. Audible put it out as an audiobook as well. And that is really a look at all of the mega truths of crisis management, how you prepare better for a crisis so that you're ready, how you manage those things when they happen, how you respond, or how you manage the aftermath if there is no solution. That book became very popular. It generated an enormous number of podcasts that I appeared on. And lo and behold, a company out in Phoenix that is a podcast producer, our friends at Black Barrel Media, and I decided to start our own podcast, and it launched in May. And its purpose is to share the perspectives, stories, and learnings from industry pros from really all walks of life who've encountered business challenges and in some cases personal challenges, and they've either prevailed or they've learned how to better prepare for the next time something like this comes around. So that is really its inspiration, and 3 episodes are out so far. Our guests have included the former head of the New York City Marathon during 9/11 and Hurricane Sandy, and how she dealt with these enormous challenges at her work. We've had an episode with Brian Burke, who is a superstar general manager in the National Hockey League, and his life journey and how he has managed a lot of conflict and a lot of challenges and crises during his career. And then we also get into the personal. So the episode that most recently was released was with a gentleman named Rob Paulson, who is a superstar, really superstar voice actor. So if you watch Spielberg's The Animaniacs, he's Yakko of The Animaniacs. He's Raphael of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and has been a real force in voice acting for decades at this point. He was diagnosed a couple of years ago with the worst possible thing you could hear if you're a voice actor, that's throat cancer.
Oh, wow.
So we delve into his journey and how he dealt with it, and how he's come out the other side of it, and now he's back to work. Back to work as an Animaniac. If nothing else, you should tune in just to hear him sing the Countries of the World song on the episode. We've got some really incredible guests that have participated and that are coming up. We talk with the executive director of the Indianapolis International Airport, and along his journey, he was also in charge of the airport in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina struck, and talks about how he managed that facility when it became a shelter, during the course of the storm. We're going to also delve into the personal journey of Willie O'Ree, who was the first NHL player of African descent. So we delve into the personal, we delve into the professional, and deal with not just the sports industry, not just the entertainment industry, but everything from facilities management. We've got a interview coming up with a major player in the commercial real estate business, and how they are going to be responding after they've come out of the other side of COVID, when nobody came to work, nobody came to the offices. And now there's a bit of resistance and reticence of people coming back to work. So we'll talk about how they're preparing for a kind of redefined market in office space and commercial real estate. So there's a lot to talk about, because there's a lot of places where things can go wrong.
How is it what have you found as you've done this? I mean, what sticks out to you as a common thread in your conversations?
What has always been important in dealing with challenges, whether they're corporate or their personal challenges, is transparency and authenticity. Right? It's all about taking responsibility for what is under your purview, and also being very genuine and very, very authentic about solving the problem, because very frequently there is a real public exposure, public perception of the kinds of things that you have to solve. So I think those are the through lines through all of it. And a lot of it also has to do with collaboration and cooperation. You can't do business on your own. You really need the talents and the passions of all the people around you to help either develop products or deliver services, or be able to handle a major catastrophe if something is headed your way.
Have you found that there's a common thread when people get to that moment where they're in crisis? That separates the people who handle the crisis well from those who fall apart. And by that, as I think about it, let me ask a question that might sound rhetorical. I don't mean it to be. What does it mean to fall apart?
Well, I'm going to restate what you said, because I think it's an important point, and that is, there's a difference between responding and reacting. If you react, which is very involuntary, it's sort of, stimulus response, right? Something happens and you immediately jump to something to either solve the problem or to mitigate the effects of that problem. If you haven't taken a beat to think about what you're doing, you could either be making the problem worse, or you could be creating different problems, right? Unintended consequences. We have an episode coming up in a couple of weeks with an NBC news producer, who said exactly that. He talked about the fact that when he's dealing with a crisis that suddenly occurs, he thinks about Gene Kranz, who was at mission control at NASA when Apollo 13, suffered its issue. And what Gene Kranz said was, take a beat, think about the problem, and solve the problem. It isn't about jumping to a conclusion, jumping to at the finish line. It's how you go about taking apart the problem and trying to create a solution for it that doesn't create bigger problems or different problems. I call that the law of unintended consequences. You probably call it the same thing. You clearly don't want to do that. You talked about falling apart. I'm going to call it panic, because that's that is something that is very common in especially the more cataclysmic something is, and the more dramatic it is, the more you tend to go to that, or people tend to go to a panic mode. It's really interesting when something like that happens. There's a release of adrenaline into your system. We talk about this in the book. And that's involuntary. It's a biological response. It's part of the fight or flight response. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen. You can't control it. What you can control is what you do with that adrenaline. And what psychologists have determined is the more you focus on solving the problem, the less panicky you feel. Because you start to feel a little bit more in control of the response. And that's really important. So the more you can, or the quicker you can get down to solving the problem, instead of just saying, oh my God, where am I going to be working tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. The more you deal with that and not worry about your reputation will be just fine as long as you do solve the problem or you do handle it correctly. Then you're less likely to panic. If a leader panics in the middle of a crisis, one of two things happens. Either people around you start to panic too, and now you've lost control of everything, or they start ignoring you because you've started to panic and they're not panicked. So you can't let that happen. You really have to be at least cool and collected on the outside. I mean, you may feel miserable and sick on the inside, and I know, take the Super Bowl blackout as an example. That was something that I was dealing with, in real time, as you may recall. I felt miserable on the inside. It's the outside that counted, though. Keeping the team together, keeping them focused on solving the problem, and then thinking about all the other effects of what solution you put into place, and how you can just recover and in our case get back to teeing up the ball for the second half.
If I may, I'd like to ask you on that. I keep replaying in my head that clip from CBS when Superdome manager Doug Thornton was saying payroll to P or something like that.
Yeah, we've lost the A feed.
Yeah.
He said, yeah.
It's like he went into robot mode. It was interesting to watch him and both of you respond. It was like he went into robot mode, but it was almost like he was one step from freezing, but didn't.
No, I don't think
I
Doug
don't
was
mean that as a
anywhere close to
pejorative. I
that.
just mean it's interesting to watch
Yeah,
the both of them adjust.
Doug, Doug knows his building. So Doug is the general manager. Well, actually, he's above the general manager of the Superdome, and he's an incredible guy. And he's been through a lot. And I'm hoping to have him on the show to talk about how he managed the Superdome during Katrina, in particular, which was, a long issue. Our issue was 34 minutes long, and it was solved and solvable, and thankfully we were able to get the game going again. What Doug did was, and everybody in that room that night did, was they immediately went back to a problem solving mode. But about 10 days before the Super Bowl, when I was involved with the Super Bowl, we did a game day simulation. And for 4 hours, we had a facilitator who knew our operating plan throw emergencies at us. And we would have everybody who was going to be making decisions that day on game day were in the same room, and we had to solve those problems together. Well, when the lights went out, we went right back to that day, 10 days before, when we were faced with a problem and we had to work together to solve it. And everybody went right back into that mode. The public, the law enforcement community, security community, immediately started checking out whether this was a cyber attack or there was a terror attack or there was something else going on. Is the building safe? Is it not safe? So they went right to that. Doug and his team, Doug Thornton and his team, started to shut off all the non-essential power in the part of the building that was not affected by the blackout, because only half of the building was without power. That was a response that they had rehearsed before. They knew what to do. I didn't know that they needed to do that. They knew. So they went ahead and did it. And they were the heroes of the day, quite honestly, because if they hadn't, the other half of the building would have failed as well. And if that had happened, the game would not have been restarted. We would have been dead in the water.
And that's what I meant when I was referring to robot mode. It's like they had a procedure, a program, and they just went right into it.
Yeah, they sure did. And I'm really grateful that they did. They shut off escalators and non-essential lighting and refrigerators. I was going to say beer taps, but that's kind of essential in a game day, especially when you got a half hour where nothing's going on. You want to be able to sell beer. But everywhere that they could shut off power and be safe about it, they did. And that was standard operating procedure for them. They knew to do that. And because of that, once we were able to reestablish power, there was actually a backup connection where we could get one half of the building back up and running. We wouldn't have been able to do both halves if the whole thing went out. It only went out in half the building. We were able to reroute the backup power source to be able to get the game going again. And then what we did was, again, thinking through all the ramifications, we didn't get started right away. The lights came back on, but we didn't start the game for another 10 minutes because everyone went back to, all right, well, what did I need? What did I need that needed power? How are we going to reboot those things, make sure that they were all up and running? Because if any of those systems, call it instant replay, for example, if instant replay had not been up and running and there was another score, which there would have been, or another controversial play and the officials went under the hood and there was no instant replay, that's a big problem, right? It's a bigger problem than just the lights going out.
Huge problem.
So we took the time to think all of that through. Is the score clock working? Are the coach to quarterback systems working? All of that. P.S. One of the coach to quarterback systems was not working, so we had to get that rebooted and re-energized. So that was one of the reasons why I learned that responding is more important than reacting, and that you have to really think through all the ramifications of the solutions to make sure you're not making problems worse or moving the problem to a different place.
I have a question which I think would lead to a great podcast, given our times. Are stadiums more vulnerable to cyber attack now?
Without question. I think we know that intuitively. I mean, look at all the places where cyber attacks have happened. If certainly if I were running a major event like the Super Bowl, it'd be something I'd be thinking about all day long. It's something clearly to lose sleep over, and I would say that is something that certainly needs to be looked at. Why? Because you've got up to 80,000 people in a small, densely packed area. And, if lights were to go out or ventilation was to fail or something like that, you could end up with, an issue where the public in that building begins to get anxious about their surroundings. One of the things we did during the blackout, which was really important, and you talked about the CBS clip on 60 Minutes Sports and CBS This Morning captured this. The first question I asked was not how do we get the lights back on. The first question I asked was, what do we tell people? Do we tell them to stay? Do we tell them to leave? If it's an unsafe building, you want them gone, right? You want them out of the building. Yeah. If it's not an unsafe building and you have a solvable problem, you don't want them to leave. You want them to stay. So that was the first thing that we had. And within a minute, but I don't think it was a minute, maybe a couple of minutes, maybe 3, we knew that we had a safe building. So the first thing was, what do you tell the 74,000 people outside my window? And the answer was, we've got a temporary disruption in power. Please remain, in the building. We're going to get started as soon as we can. And that's exactly what we did.
Did you ever have a feeling that maybe there was a second you would have to tell them to leave? Was that
of course? Of course. Well, that was the spirit of the question. I didn't know the answer. I knew that we had to tell them something. And the wonderful thing about stadiums and arenas and most places of public assembly like that, the power source for the public address system, it has a battery backup. So if you lose power, you still have a way to talk to people for at least a half an hour. And so we did have that capability. And in some cases, at one point, we actually had the capability of posting something on some of the video screens as well. But it was the first thing that I thought was, do we have a safe building or do we not have a safe building? If we don't have a safe building because there's a fire somewhere or there's God forbid, an attack of some kind that involve the cutting of power, then we have to know what to tell people. Where do they go? Is there a fire on one side of the building, not on the other side of the building? Do we tell them to move to one side of the building or the other? Do we tell them to find the closest door and get out of Dodge? Those were all things that we were thinking about. But I also recognized at the time, and all of us did, was that, once you evacuate, you're done, right? The Super Bowl is not going to restart. If you've evacuated, you've evacuated. It can take hours to get people back into the building through the security protocols that were in place at the time as a level 1 national security event, magnetometers and resetting the ticket scanners and all of that, would have been really, really difficult to get done and get the game going again with an audience.
And what's a level 1 event? That's something I hear about, but I had a chance to ask. What is a level 1 event, by the way?
A level 1 event. So the inauguration of a president is a level 1 national security event, or national security special event, I think they call it. And it requires certain security enhancements, if you will. It does involve the federal government. There is usually a series of agencies that get involved, from Secret Service to FBI to CIA to et cetera. There might be a temporary flight restriction over the facility, so you can't fly commercial aircraft over the building. And Super Bowl is that you haven't seen a blip or an aerial shot typically of the Super Bowl in recent years, and that's because you're not allowed to fly over the stadium. So temporary flight restriction. When you do see an aerial shot, it's often out of a police helicopter, or if you don't see traffic, it was done on a different day, right? So, sometimes they pre-record those aerial shots, especially for domes where you don't have to see that there's actually, people in the stands.
Oh, and also clarify for those like at Super Bowl 50, we were at in the seats, and we had the flyover with the Blue Angel. I believe the Blue Angels. I believe it.
Yeah. Well, those are military aircraft. That's okay. That's okay. It's really commercial aircraft that aren't permitted to fly over the stadium during the Super Bowl or over a presidential inauguration or any other event that's designated such. Not very many are. There's just a handful.
I gotta ask,
and it also includes, you have to have magnetometers in place. You have to have a hardened perimeter. In the case of the Super Bowl, it's got to be a minimum of 300 feet from the wall of the stadium.
I hate to interrupt you, but I have to say one thing. You're starting to make me think of Irwin Allen.
Oh, the disaster movie guy?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you got something there. I think you can make movies out of this.
There was a movie. There was a movie about the Super Bowl years ago called Black Friday. Black Sunday. Black Sunday. Of course, it wasn't a Friday. Black Friday is something else.
That was kind of. We need a football disaster movie.
Yeah.
Listen, but all to the side, I think you've got.
If you know what teams I followed over the years, those have been football disasters. Every Sunday, so we don't have to go into endangering the public.
But seriously, I think with all this content, I think you're on to a platform where you could branch out into producing movies or writing treatments or that sort of thing. Because I just flew out of my head. I thought I knew Irwin Allen's background, but it seems like you guys are on parallel paths. And it's just an idea, though.
Well, yeah, I like producing events better than making them disappear. So I'm going to keep doing that. But I do appreciate the thought.
Yeah. And speaking of which, what is the next event you're producing on and involved in coming up?
I'm working on the Major League Baseball draft in Denver. So that's really exciting. We'll have 2,000 people at the theater, Belco Theater in Denver.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It'll be the Major League Baseball draft has typically been a television show out of the MLB Network studios in Secaucus, New Jersey. They have done a couple of fan accessible drafts, more than several, many years ago at Disney Wide World of Sports. Now they're expanding it and really trying to make it a fan event, and I'm having a blast working on it.
This is news though. You're heading up a transformation of the NBA draft. Excuse me, the Major League Baseball draft, right?
Well, essentially, I'll let them determine whether it's transformational or not. But yeah, clearly having a live audience there and entertaining the fans, is something I'm used to doing. I did it for many years with the NFL draft. I did it for even more years for the NHL draft. So this will actually be draft number 24 for me. It's just the first for baseball.
What do you believe Major League Baseball, how will this impact Major League Baseball? It will increase the player views. In other words, let me ask a stupid question for those watching. Why do it? What are they trying to achieve that you brought from the NFL?
Well, I'm going to leave it to them to determine what it is that they want to achieve. I know what my objectives are, and my objectives, I've shared those objectives with baseball, and they have agreed with them, which is that I think we need to make, you know, introduce the players, the incoming class of players to fans in a compelling way. Um, Baseball it's tough because there's a lot of players coming out of high school. There's a lot of players coming out of college. You don't have a feeder system the way you do with junior hockey or with college football. So, some very passionate MLB fans may know who the top prospects, not playing in the professional game might be. But we want to get that to more and more fans, and we want to do it in an entertaining way. What's really cool about the MLB draft is it moves really fast, much like the NHL draft. It's 4 minutes between picks, not 10. During the first round. So, it takes less than half the amount of time. And that's been, part of the equation is how do you do this in an entertaining way, and how do you make it part of the baseball calendar, another tentpole event, for Major League Baseball and another fan pleaser.
I'm tweeting as you talk. Former NFL draft producer in charge of 2021 MLB Draft talks about it below, with the video. That's news. And it's hashtag breaking. We got to do these things in real time, right? I mean, that's big news, Frank. Congratulations. You'll be the czar of all drafts in professional sports. When all this is done.
I know what happened to the czars, so I'm not interested in being a czar. But I do enjoy working on
them. What's next for the podcast in terms of numbers, producers? Have you lined up sponsors, or is that the area that you're headed in it, or how are you guys doing it?
Yeah, right now we are commercial supported, so that's been
congratulations.
That's been really cool. We have a deal with Airwave, which is a podcast network, marketing network, and so there are commercials on most of the episodes. The shorter bonus episodes don't typically have commercials. The commercials, mercifully, are short, 30 seconds, and then we get back, right back into talking about the issues at large. My mission was to do this in a way that is not monotone. I don't want it is a business podcast, but it's not about one particular business. It's not about the event business. It's not about the sports business, which is, kind of the nexus of where I work the most often. It's about business in general. It's about life in general. It's life and business skills on how to deal with challenges that you're faced with, very suddenly, or the ability to plan better for the things that are coming your way. Every interview we've done, I've learned a ton from the people who have been involved. We had as I mentioned, the Mary Wittenberg, who was the head of the marathon in New York during Hurricane Sandy and during 9/11, and she's now the head of EF Pro Cycling. She's still in the sports business, but when you listen to it, it's really not about sports. It's really about how you deal with the media when something awful happens. It's about how you think about who you have to talk to and in what order when something terrible happens. It talks about not her interview in particular talks about how one solution to a problem is not necessarily applicable to the next problem. Right? Part of the learning is that every challenge, every crisis is a little bit different. There are some commonalities. I mentioned authenticity and transparency. I mentioned responding instead of reacting. but it's really, beyond that, the actual tactic you use to get yourself out of a problem may be different from one thing to the next.
It reminds me of a situation that I had when I was working on uh, our making sure that our bid for the 2005 Super Bowl got in, and we had Palm Computer make 32 Palm Pilots. Remember those?
Yes, I do.
NFL logo that was designed to be a GMO Hill Holiday of a football integrated circuit. And I couldn't get any of my board members to help me volunteer to put the Palm Pilots in a box because, candidly, our effort was really poisoned by the fact that the mayor was hemming and hawing about things. And I don't want to get into a place that could really wind up a movie unto itself at some point. But seriously, but I worked until 4 that morning boxing them, and then I took them into the administrative office in Oakland, and there was a security guard that refused to let me. Hear me out. This is one of those "what do I do" moments. Refused to let me leave the boxes in front of the building for FedEx to pick them up. All the while, and I'm saying this straight out as it happened because it's appropriate for Juneteenth, I think, he was allowing a young white couple to unload their artwork there, having no paperwork from them, just simply on their word. But me as a city official, and he openly yelled at me. And someone might have the idea that maybe he was white. No, he was Indian. He just had this idea that I didn't belong there, didn't explain why. And I did the one thing I should not have done, but it was crazily cathartic. I yelled at him. And I threatened to call the police and have him arrested. And then I invited him to call the police because I said, if the police come, they will arrest you for interrupting Mr. Super Bowl Oakland's effort. And so he left me alone. But it was one of the wildest situations I've ever been in my entire life. And so you talk about what do when things go wrong. I think it'd be fascinating to talk to Black executives and find out the weirdly stupid things that they come up with, who may be in your line of work or profession, right? That someone white generally it doesn't have to deal with, or maybe they did, but in a different way, because there was no reason for that. And I have a whole list of these that happened back then that could fill a book in itself, accept that. And yet one thing I learned from watching you, from knowing you and Doug Thornton, a number of people over the years, because that was my first rodeo at that sort of thing. All I had was a lot of determination and this stupid belief that I knew everything more than anybody else. But I learned. There's a saying. It's called, "And this too shall pass." Patience. Don't lose your. And that's the one thing I learned from.
Well, your suggestion is a great one, and we should, and we will, talk to communities that are overlooked or underrepresented or mistreated. We are, as I mentioned, going to talk with Willie O'Ree and talk about that from a sports perspective. I've known Willie for probably 25 years. I'm really looking forward to chatting with him on it. He and I are both on on the board of a charity that is called the Carnegie Initiative. And the Carnegie Initiative is named after Herb Carnegie, who preceded Willie as a hockey player in Canada, in Quebec, in the province of Quebec, who never had the opportunity to play in the National Hockey League. So he came before Willie. And I got to meet Herb and listen to his story and his journey probably 15 years ago. Herb's passed on since then. But a new initiative to help help increase diversity in the sport, and opportunity in the sport for everyone. And Willie's on that board. I'm on that board. Actually, Brian Burke is on that board as well. Some really incredible people are working hard on that. So we're dealing with that on the hockey side of the equation. In terms of business and life, yeah, that's something that we should absolutely do, and I will. And thank you for that suggestion. We're also chatting with Chanel Keenan in a few weeks, who is the intersectionality consultant for the Seattle Kraken. Chanel is mobility impaired. She's got a disease commonly known as brittle bone syndrome, and so she is working with the new Seattle team to make sure that every aspect of being a fan of the club takes into account Americans with disabilities, and so we really are looking at when things go wrong in a way that is both corporately useful and socially responsible.
Frank, as we close out, I want to ask you, if I can, about taking you back to your Super Bowl work in the NFL, but in a different way. As you know, the Raiders are in Las Vegas now, which means, and I'm not saying this as the point of my question, but it does mean that I'm the only person in NFL history to have formed the bid to bring the Super Bowl to Oakland. But at any rate, my question is, when will Las Vegas get a Super Bowl, and what is the problem, with that? Excuse me. What is the problem with Las Vegas as you see it, and why the delays? Sorry, I thought I had that on a.
I don't know that there are delays in bringing the Super Bowl there, other than construction delays. Las Vegas will get a Super Bowl. I'm certain of it. I don't have any inside scoop on that. I do know that the way Super Bowls are awarded today is different from the way it was when you mounted bids for Oakland on behalf of Oakland, and different from the way that Super Bowls were awarded when I was an executive at the NFL. Nowadays, there's the owners collectively, and the I think it's called the Major Events Committee. Used to be called the Super Bowl Advisory Committee. Yeah. The Major Events Committee determines where or makes recommendations to the owners at large where Super Bowls should go for whatever strategic reason the NFL has. And I'm not privy to what those are, but I would be stunned if Las Vegas wasn't one of the places that a Super Bowl would eventually find itself. It's got its own challenges being in Las Vegas, security and otherwise, but every city has challenges. So I have no doubt in my mind that that's gonna happen in relatively soon.
Yeah, I think it'll be very exciting. It just seems to me that it would be an incredible opportunity for Las Vegas to have a jump start, and but I do recognize that Las Vegas is event chalked, so it's hard. I think the best thing there would be for the NFL to have its own hotel.
Well, there's a themed hotel for just about everything, isn't there, in Las Vegas? Yeah, you know what? The Golden Knights in the NHL have done a remarkable job, capturing people's attention in Las Vegas, and they went to the Stanley Cup, right? Mm-hmm. So I have no doubt that the Raiders are going to win the hearts and minds of people in Vegas, and I know that the people who will be traveling to Vegas to watch the Raiders, whether they're coming from Southern California or Northern California, there's going to be a huge interest just regionally in coming to Vegas for a weekend, going to a game on Sunday, and then going home.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to say this to Mark Bedane, the president of the Raiders, and Mark Davis, the owner. Hey, you guys are Stadco. You have the events. This is the man you need to hire as your consultant. Right there. There you go.
Yeah, they're really talented guys. listen, my phone is. I'll answer the phone if the phone rings, but I know that they know what they want to achieve, and the NFL has incredible people working there too, and my successor in the job I had, Peter O'Reilly, is just an incredibly smart and focused guy, and he's going to do a tremendous job in Vegas.
I got to ask that before we close, because it occurred. I thought if I ever got you again, I'd ask you about what Peter O'Reilly did in Nashville, taking over 32 city blocks.
Yeah.
And one arrest. That I was there. I'm still.
Yeah. So they let you out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, you made bail.
You knew.
I'm glad to hear that. No, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. Peter deserves a lot of credit. The whole league does, and so does the city of Nashville. Nashville is, and I've known this for the many years that I've worked on events in Nashville for multiple leagues. They know how to do things. They know how to do big events, and they know how to do music events. And I know that the city played a really big part in that as well. And frankly, the NFL couldn't succeed at doing what they were doing unless they had the full support of the city and the club, and they did.
Yes,
so, good for them. Good for them. It was great stuff.
And he told me about how they brought it all together on Zinni 62 YouTube when I was there. I'm just impressed with what Nashville did, but that scale and scope to basically you take a city and build a city within it, and yet have it work smoothly over a multi-day period with rain and everything else. I'm still on cloud nine about that.
They did great.
Yeah,
they did great.
Frank, you got to get Peter O'Reilly on your podcast. That would be a good one.
I'm gonna let him off the hook. We are really, really good friends, and I would love to have him on the podcast. I don't want him to feel odd, talking to me about things that went wrong for him, because it's just, if it's weird for him, I don't want him to have to worry about that.
Right.
He's more than welcome. I think the world of him, and I think the world of his team, and he'd always be welcome.
I think having you both on, maybe both of you should come on my show, because then I can make sports history. Hey, stick around in the backstage, my friend. I got something I want to share with you, actually pertinent to what you're going to be doing. Frank, first of all, folks, make sure right now you go and you check out When Things Go Wrong and listen to his podcasts, and then wait for the next round. And remember, we just broke news. He's watched the end of Major League Baseball draft because he's reforming it right here. So anyway, Frank, by the way, would you like to leave a contact for anybody watching, or your website?
You can always see what we're doing at Fast Traffic at fasttrafficevents.com. We've been doing a lot of fun stuff over the last several years. Last year was a little tough, but we're back, doing what we love to do. And by all means, please, check out the podcast. It's gotten great ratings. The audience is exploding. It's available on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Audible. I mean, pretty much everywhere you go, you can find it.
Frank, stick around backstage, folks. We'll be back later to talk about Howard Terminal and the Oakland Athletics. Subscribe to Zinni 62 and bookmark oaklandnewsnow.com. That ends this broadcast. Thanks, Frank.